Welcome back. In this video, we're going to begin our study of units and their use in business. A big difference between your prior math studies and what you will be doing in both your studies and your work in business is that most of your calculations in the business context moving forward will involve units of measure for quantities and counts of people, places, or things. For example, in the past, you may have used ratios to solve math problems. I can probably say you definitely have used ratios to solve math problems. But in business, you might use them to calculate unit cost, which is the cost in dollars per unit of a good. Unit costs are used to determine how many units of a product can be produced given limited resources. So they're very important in business decision making. Unit costs are in units of dollars per unit of the good. So it's not just a ratio, it's a ratio of two numbers that have specific units. Consider a basic problem like taking 5% of 2,400. That could apply in a number of business contexts. One that comes to mind is it could calculate how many of the 2,400 tires a company has sold will have to be replaced by warranty given a 5% failure rate. That would be very important for that company, that calculation would be. It would tell the company how many of these tires do we expect to come back and require coverage under our warranty plan. That would help them calculate how much money they should set aside for their warranties. Another example where 5% of 2,400 would be useful is it could calculate how much interest will be owed at 5% on a $2,400 loan. So in the case of the tires, you'd be talking about a number of tires as a percent of 2,400. In the case of the loan, you'd be talking about an amount of money. It's the same calculation, but these are two very different subjects in the real world. This is why we need to pay attention to units whenever they're present in a calculation, because depending on what those units are, the calculations mean different things. In this section, we are going to be focused on going over ratios and units, doing some unit conversions, and we're going to start with using units to make comparisons in a context that all of us can relate to. Even if you don't drink green tea, you're aware that people do, and that it's for sale at your local supermarket as it is for sale at my local supermarket. So we're going to use some data collected recently at my local supermarket in order to illustrate how units work. We're going to make some calculations with them, and we're going to talk about how they facilitate comparison. Figure 10 has details of 6 different brands of tea bags containing plain green tea. So 6 different products, number 1 through number 6. And what we can see on the parts of the packaging that is showing is the number of tea bags per box, the net weights in both ounces and grams, and the price. So for example, tea number 5 costs $5.99. In that box, you get 40 tea bags. The net weight of the tea is 1.82 ounces, which is the same thing as 51 grams. These 6 products are all packaged plain green tea, which is crumbled leaves of the Camellia sinensis bush, processed and roasted to produce the characteristic color and flavor of green tea. However, they differ in number of tea bags per box, net weight, and price. I want to say I don't doubt that some of them taste differently too, but we can't tell that from the box, and so we're just going to set that aside during this comparison. All 6 products were just plain green tea, no additives. We can use the data shown in Figure 10 to calculate several relevant comparisons between these products. Let's start with example 6.1. Calculate the price per tea bag for each product. What are the units on this ratio? Which product is the cheapest per tea bag, and which is the most expensive? The ratio we're going to be calculating is the total price divided by the number of tea bags. That's going to give us the units dollars, because the total price is in dollars, over number of tea bags, which is going to work out to 1 bag once we do that division. So tea number 1 costs $3.29. The box has 20 tea bags. We're going to round this to 2 decimals because we're dealing with money here. And what you get is 16 cents per bag. Tea number 2 is $4.99 divided by 16 tea bags in the box. Get 31 cents per bag. Tea number 3 is $3.79 per box. 20 bags in the box comes to 19 cents per bag. So just to be clear, the numerators in each of these cases are bags, and that's why we end up with dollars per bag, because we divided the dollars that the product cost divided by the number of tea bags that each product contains. So we divided the cost equally over the number of tea bags in each case. Given that these are repetitive calculations and you see how this goes, I recommend you pause the video, do the remaining 3 teas yourself, and then start the video again to check that you got the same answers as me. The cheapest per tea bag is tea number 6. It's way cheaper than the other ones. It will probably not surprise you to know that this was the store brand. It also was one of the larger boxes. So you can usually expect larger quantity boxes to be cheaper per unit within the box. But even so, 7 cents per tea bag is extremely, extremely inexpensive compared to the others. Less than half the price of any of the others per bag. The most expensive was tea number 2, which came out to 31 cents per bag. Considering that typically 1 tea bag leads to 1 cup of tea, the comparison made in example 6.1 makes sense. We're kind of calculating out how much per cup you're going to get from this package. But are all these tea bags created equal? What if different products use different amounts of tea per tea bag? Net weight gives the weight of a food product minus any packaging. So here the net weight is measuring the weight of the tea in each of these packages. Note that the net weight is given in ounces and in grams. Either can be used for comparison, and you'll just find that depending on the scale of what you're looking at, one or the other will be easier to use. We actually have examples of both coming up. So let's compare them using that. Example 6.2 says, calculate the weight of tea per tea bag for each product. Use grams for this because the results will be easier to interpret. What are the units on this ratio? Which product has the most tea per tea bag and which has the least? So the ratio we're going to be calculating here is going to be weight in grams per tea bag. So that is going to result in a ratio that's going to be grams per tea bag, or grams per bag. Starting with tea number 1, the net weight there is 30 grams, and we're dividing by the 20 bags of tea in the box. And you get 1.5 grams per bag. Now you see how I wrote the 1.5 and then wrote the grams per bag? That could be equivalently written 1.5 grams per bag, similarly to how we wrote price per bag in example 6.1. Those are 2 equivalent ways of doing the same thing. How many grams of tea per bag is tea number 2 giving us? There we have 31 grams divided by 16 bags, and that is 1.94 grams per bag. So now that you've seen 2 examples, go ahead and pause the video if you would, please. Work out the remaining 4 ratios and then press play and see if you got the same as me. All right, so rounding these all to 2 decimals, unless they come out even, to fewer decimals than that, decimal places than that, we've got a different ranking. Now, if you're looking for the most tea per tea bag, which is what this problem has asked us to answer, the most tea per tea bag is tea number 4. That's 2 grams of tea per bag. You see how I've written grams per bag differently in each of these cases. All of these are equivalent ways to write those units. Tea number 3 has the least tea per bag. So just looking between examples 6.1 and example 6.2, we see that the 2 teas that were on our radar for 6.1 as the most expensive and least expensive per bag are different than the 2 teas that have the most and least tea per bag. So depending on what your goal is, you would choose different teas. Another aspect we might consider is the total amount of tea we are getting and how much it costs. Cost per amount of tea could be compared among these 6 that we're looking at. And in addition, this kind of calculation would be useful to compare these 6 plain green tea in bags products against, say, other products that provide loose green tea. So let's take a look at example 6.3 to see what I mean. In example 6.3, we're going to calculate the price per total amount of tea for each product in figure 10. Use ounces for the weight because the results will be easier to interpret. What are the units on this ratio? So total amount, of course, that amount means weight. So the ratio we will be calculating in this case is going to be total price over total weight. We're measuring the price in dollars, and in this case, we're going to measure the weight in ounces. So I'm going to use Oz for that. So our units are going to be dollars per ounce. Now the reason we used grams in 6.2 and we're using ounces here is 6.2 we were dividing the weight by the number of tea bags. And when we measured the weight in grams, the number of grams was usually larger than was always larger than the number of tea bags. Whereas had we used ounces, that would not have been the case. So if we had gone ounces per bag, we would have ended up with tiny numbers that had leading zeros after the decimal. Whereas using grams, we ended up with easily comparable numbers. In example 6.3, we're using ounces, and the reason is because we're going to get a total price per ounce that is going to be in magnitudes that are going to make sense in currency. Whereas if we used total price per grams, we would end up with leading zeros after the decimal in currency, which, it just gets harder to compare. So there's no reason other than that to use one or the other. So for tea number 1, the price is $3.29, and the total number of ounces of tea in this box is 1.05 ounces. Rounding that to 2 decimals, you get $3.13 per ounce. Tea number 2 was $4.99, how much it cost, and you get 1.09 ounces of tea, so that is $4.58 per ounce. Now, if you wouldn't mind, pause the video, calculate this ratio for the other 4 teas, and meet me back here to look at the answers. So in each case, the ratio we have calculated has units of dollars per ounce. Tea number 3 is $4.16 per ounce. Tea number 4, $2.49 per ounce. Number 5 is $3.29 per ounce. And number 6 is $1.08 per ounce. So once again, our store brand tea number 6 has won the race, as it did in example 6.1. And tea number 2. Tea number 2 is definitely pricier per ounce than any of the rest. You're going to pay the least amount per ounce by buying tea number 6 and the most amount per ounce by buying tea number 2.